Did you hear about the decision handed down by the Supreme Court without Justice Ginsburg? It was ruthless. Now, if you didn't understand that joke, give me a few minutes, and by the time we talk about the judicial branch, you'll probably understand. The judicial branch, our third branch in our conversation on government, is comprised of our court system. Now, these federal judges, whether you're on the district court, appellate court, or Supreme Court, are appointed for life by the President of the United States. Now, why do we even have a Supreme Court or a district court or an appellate court? What's the purpose of those? Well, let's think about it this way. If our Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we're a nation of laws, not of men, how then would we settle disputes? See, if we didn't have a court system, is it mob rule? Is it just whatever the majority wants? Well, the majority can trample rights. In fact, we've seen that throughout history. So how best to come to an understanding is through a court system, through what we call judicial review. That way, every time a law is implemented or the president makes a decision, the court system can look at that decision or can look at that law and decide if it lines up or if it passes constitutional muster. Just meaning if we put the Constitution right here and that law or executive order or action right here, does the Supreme Court approve of what this piece is? If not, we're going to get rid of it. But if it's okay, then we can call it constitutional. Now, the structure of the judicial branch is like this. At the base level, we have our district courts. These are where all of the individual trials are held, determining what kind of law was broken, right was violated, you name it. At that point, if a decision is made, the citizens have a right to appeal that decision. So if you don't like the decision that was made at the district court level, you can take that to what we call the appellate court, and the appellate court will review what happened at the district court. This is a phenomenal thing, a phenomenal right of the citizen to have, because it ensures even if a decision was made that went against what you thought was appropriate, what you thought was justice, you have another chance to see justice out. Now, even at the appellate level, if you don't like what the appellate court rules, the Supreme Court can overlook that. Now, the Supreme Court is the final say on the matter, but nonetheless, that's a three-tiered system of the judicial branch. But don't think that every controversial decision is going to be handled by the Supreme Court. In fact, let me ask you this. How many cases, or rather, what percentage of cases do you think goes to the Supreme Court for that final judicial review? We'll say 40%, 20%, 5%, or 1%. What do you think? If you guessed about 1%, you're right. 1% of cases that are decided at that district level end up going to the Supreme Court for review. Now, the people that make up the Supreme Court, these justices of the Supreme Court, they are appointed by the president and, if confirmed, serve for life. And they're typically the ideology of the president. So if you have a Republican president, you're going to have a Republican-leaning justice, a Democrat president, a Democrat-leaning justice. If you want your case heard by the Supreme Court, you have to submit a filing brief. It gives a brief overview of what the case is going to be about. Then you have written arguments that you submit to the Supreme Court that they're going to sit there and review. Then that moves into the oral arguments. This is where you actually sit in front of these 9 robed justices and you have to make your case. Was something unconstitutional? Were somebody's rights violated? This is the time where everybody's watching. What are the justices going to say? What kind of questions are they going to ask? After oral arguments, the Supreme Court has what's called the conference. This is where they get together at a long table and they just discuss what was said. They vote on their decision. What was the right violated? Is the law constitutional or not? And then they assign who's going to write the opinion of the court. Now, when we have an opinion, if they were always 9-0, okay, whatever the Supreme Court says goes. That's called the majority opinion, the opinion of the court. But we also have what's called the dissenting opinion. So imagine we have a case that's a 5-4 decision. 5 justices think a right was violated, 4 justices think a right was not violated. That's a pretty close split. So we have, for the 4 justices, they are allowed to write what's called a dissenting opinion, which gives them an opportunity to explain why they did not vote with the majority. This establishes some legal parameters for which lawyers and constitutional scholars will look at for later cases. This leads us to the idea of judicial restraint versus judicial activism. And we have a special video on that topic that you can watch, but really dive into understanding, is a Supreme Court justice supposed to apply the law of the land as written in the Constitution? Or can the Supreme Court justice maybe change something around, infuse some of their own opinions and ideas to advance what they think Congress probably meant or what the president intended to do? Courts are seen as what we call legitimate because largely we defer to their judgment. These are brilliant legal scholars, and while we might not agree with every decision, we like, as the American public, we like having a body, a branch of government that seems to be immune from the political process. Sure, there are politics around the Supreme Court. I don't want to lie and tell you otherwise, but we like the fact that these men and women that are put in these esteemed positions are making those decisions, those difficult decisions, based on what our founding document, the Constitution, has to say on the matter. We like the Supreme Court in that respect because the Supreme Court, through that judicial review, makes sure the Constitution stays supreme.